This constant undermining of your sense of self-worth creates a toxic relationship dynamic where you are left questioning your value. You may find yourself apologizing for things you don't need to apologize for, trying to change parts of yourself to fit his preferences, or seeking reassurance from him constantly. You may become more and more focused on meeting his needs and expectations while neglecting your own desires and self-care. The more you give in to this cycle of feeling inadequate, the more you become dependent on him for validation. Your own sense of identity becomes wrapped up in his approval, and your happiness hinges on his acceptance of you. It's essential to recognize when this pattern is occurring, as it can be difficult to see at first. The process is gradual, with small comments and behaviors that seem insignificant on the surface, but accumulate over time. However, as these tactics become more consistent, you begin to realize that the relationship is not about mutual respect and care, but about one person using the other to fulfill their own desires at the expense of the other's well-being. In a healthy relationship, both partners lift each other up, offering support and encouragement and allowing each other to thrive as individuals. But in a relationship where one person is using the other, the dynamic is one of control, insecurity, and manipulation, leaving the other person feeling inferior, unworthy, and emotionally drained. One of the most significant signs that a man is using you is when he consistently makes you feel inferior or less than him. This behavior can be subtle at first, often disguised as teasing or light criticism, but over time it becomes apparent that he is attempting to diminish your sense of self-worth. He may do this through insults, belittling remarks, or constantly pointing out your flaws, even when they are irrelevant or insignificant. In doing so, he establishes a dynamic where you begin to feel like you are not good enough, as if you have to constantly prove your value in the relationship. This not only erodes your confidence, but also manipulates you into a state of dependency, where you feel you need his approval to feel worthy of respect and love. The belittling can take many forms, starting with small, seemingly harmless comments. He might joke about your appearance, your intelligence, or your choices under the guise of playful teasing. Initially, you may laugh it off, thinking it's just his way of being funny or that he doesn't mean anything by it. But as these remarks become more frequent, they start to chip away at your self-esteem. What might have seemed like a harmless comment in the beginning begins to feel more personal, and you start questioning yourself. Yes, you might begin to wonder if he's right, if there's truth in what he says about you, and that self-doubt can slowly take hold of you. As the relationship progresses, this behavior can escalate into more direct forms of criticism. For instance, when you share something meaningful or important to you, he might downplay it, dismissing it as unimportant or trivial. If you express a feeling, he might invalidate it by saying things like, "You're overreacting," or "That's not a big deal, you're being too sensitive." These dismissive reactions make you feel like your emotions, thoughts, and opinions are not valid, reinforcing the notion that you are not worthy of being taken seriously. Over time, this creates an environment where you feel as though your thoughts and feelings don't matter, and you might begin to question your own perception of reality. In more extreme cases, the belittling can turn into outright verbal abuse. He might use harsh words, insults, or personal attacks that directly target your insecurities. These are meant to break you down and make you feel small, weak, or inadequate. His comments may center on your appearance, your abilities, your intelligence, or anything that he knows is a sensitive subject for you. The aim is not just to criticize, but to weaken you emotionally, leaving you feeling as though you're unworthy of love or respect. This can have a profound impact on your mental health, leading to feelings of anxiety, depression, and a distorted sense of self-worth. This tactic of undermining your self-esteem often comes paired with moments of affection or charm. The man who uses you might behave in a way that seems loving or caring at certain points, showering you with compliments or gestures that make you feel good. However, these moments are often fleeting and inconsistent, designed to create a sense of confusion and emotional dependency. Just as you start to feel good about yourself, he may take another step to bring you down, ensuring that you remain dependent on him for validation. This cycle of praise followed by criticism can leave you emotionally drained, unsure of where you stand, and constantly seeking his approval. A key part of making you feel inferior is his refusal to acknowledge your achievements or successes. When you accomplish something significant or take pride in something you've done, he may ignore it or downplay it, acting as though it's no big deal or something anyone could have done. He might even make a dismissive comment like, "That wasn't as hard as you think," or "I expected you to do that." This minimizes your accomplishments, making you feel like you're not capable of achieving anything noteworthy on your own. In these moments, you may feel as though your success is only valid if it's acknowledged by him, and that without his approval, it's not worth celebrating. Over time, this can erode your sense of self-confidence and create a dependency on his acknowledgement. Additionally, a man who seeks to make you feel inferior will often engage in comparison. He may compare you unfavorably to others, highlighting how someone else does something better or is more attractive, more intelligent, or more successful. This comparison reinforces the idea that you are not enough and that others are always superior. You might begin to feel like you have to compete for his attention or affection, as if you are constantly falling short of the standards he has set for you. These comparisons are often meant to create insecurity and self-doubt, making you feel as though you are always striving to be something you are not, someone who meets his expectations, no matter how unrealistic they may be. Another way a man who is using you avoids accountability is by continuously making excuses for his behavior. Instead of taking ownership of his mistakes, he will justify his actions by pointing to external factors, such as his busy schedule, his upbringing, or his emotional state at the time. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just stressed out, or you know how I get when I'm tired. It's not my fault," or examples of excuses he might offer. While it's true that stress and fatigue can affect one's behavior, a pattern of continually using these as excuses shows a lack of willingness to accept responsibility for his actions. Instead of working on improving his reactions or addressing the root causes of his behavior, he focuses on blaming outside forces, leaving you to feel like the issue lies with you for not understanding or accommodating his circumstances. When he avoids accountability, it also impacts how he views the relationship itself. He may never truly apologize for his actions or admit when he's wrong, creating a toxic cycle where his behavior goes unchecked. Without accountability, there's no room for growth or improvement within the relationship. You might find yourself constantly trying to fix things, apologizing for issues that aren't yours to own, or feeling as though you are the only one trying to make things right. Now, this dynamic can lead to a sense of emotional exhaustion as you invest more and more into trying to maintain the relationship, while he contributes little effort in accepting his role in the dysfunction. A lack of accountability also reflects a deeper lack of respect. When a person refuses to own up to their mistakes, it shows that they do not value the other person's feelings, needs, or experiences. In a healthy relationship, both individuals recognize that they are equal partners and that their actions have consequences on one another. If a man refuses to take accountability, it reveals a deep disregard for you and the emotional work you are doing to maintain the relationship. It's a one-sided approach that places all the responsibility on you to manage the emotional fallout from his behavior without any genuine effort on his part to make amends or change. Moreover, this pattern of avoiding accountability can lead to a situation where the relationship becomes stagnant. Without addressing issues, neither of you can grow or evolve. The tension and unresolved conflicts build over time, creating an emotional rift that becomes harder to repair. The man who is using you will likely continue this behavior, expecting you to continually adapt and adjust to his needs, while he refuses to do the same for you. This lack of mutual accountability makes it impossible to create a healthy and balanced partnership, as it is built on an unequal understanding of responsibility. Additionally, a man who refuses to take accountability may also attempt to manipulate the situation by playing the victim. If you call him out on his behavior, he may try to turn the tables and make you feel guilty for confronting him. He could say things like, "You always attack me when I'm already down," or "I can't believe you're blaming me for everything." making you feel like the bad guy for bringing up valid concerns. This manipulation further distances him from owning up to his actions and puts the burden on you to repair the damage he's caused. Instead of seeing the issue clearly, you are left to manage his emotions and false narratives, reinforcing the power imbalance in the relationship. Ultimately, the refusal to take accountability not only prevents any meaningful resolution to the issues at hand, but also leads to a breakdown of trust. Trust is built on the foundation that both individuals are honest, transparent, and willing to take responsibility for their actions. Without accountability, trust is eroded, and the relationship becomes a space of emotional instability and disillusionment. In any healthy relationship, accountability is crucial. It is the recognition that both parties are responsible for their actions, words, and contributions to the dynamics of the relationship. When someone refuses to take accountability for their mistakes, actions, or shortcomings, it signals a deeper problem with the relationship. A man who is using you will often avoid taking responsibility for his actions, never owning up to his mistakes or acknowledging the impact his behavior has on you. Instead, he will deflect, blame others, or make excuses to justify his actions, leaving you to shoulder the burden of both his failures and your own emotion. The first sign of this lack of accountability can be found in the way he reacts when confronted with a problem or issue. If you bring up something that's bothering you, whether it's a hurtful comment he made, a promise he broke, or an action that left you feeling neglected or unimportant, his response is typically defensive or dismissive. Rather than accepting responsibility for his actions and acknowledging the hurt they caused, he will immediately deflect blame, perhaps turning the situation around to make it about your actions or reactions instead. He might say things like, "If you hadn't done X, I wouldn't have done Y," or overreacting, "It's not a big deal," minimizing the situation to avoid addressing the real issue. This type of response not only evades accountability, but also invalidates your feelings, making you question whether your concerns are legitimate in the first place. In some cases, he might even deny that anything went wrong at all. Gaslighting is a common tactic used by people who refuse to take accountability. He may insist that things didn't happen the way you remember, claiming that your perception is wrong or distorted. He could say something like, "You're remembering that wrong," or "That's not how it went at all," attempting to rewrite the narrative to suit his own version of events. This denial forces you to doubt your own experiences, creating confusion and uncertainty. Instead of taking responsibility for his actions, he leaves you questioning your own reality, further reinforcing his avoidance of accountability. One of the more blatant manifestations of self-serving behavior is the repeated disregard for your boundaries. Boundaries are essential in any healthy relationship as they define how individuals will treat each other and what is acceptable behavior. A man who is using you will push or ignore your boundaries when they conflict with his desires. For example, if you've expressed the need for more space, time alone, or a certain level of respect, he will likely ignore those requests, insisting that his needs take precedence. He may even attempt to make you feel guilty for asserting your boundaries, flipping the situation so that you feel as though you are the one in the wrong for needing space or setting limits. This constant violation of your boundaries not only shows that your needs are unimportant to him, but also that he lacks respect for you as an individual with your own thoughts, feelings, and personal space. Another sign of self-serving actions is the lack of emotional investment. In a healthy relationship, both people are emotionally invested in each other's well-being, willing to support one another through the ups and downs of life. However, a man who is using you will remain emotionally distant or aloof, offering little support when you face difficulties and expecting you to always be there for him when he needs you. His emotional availability is shallow at best, appearing only when he requires something from you, whether it's attention, affection, or validation. The rest of the time, he may be absent, indifferent, or focused solely on his own concerns. His emotional engagement with you is conditional, based on what he can gain, rather than being a genuine, two-sided exchange. This self-centeredness also manifests in the ways decisions are made. Whether it's in a relationship, in a friendship, or at work, a person who uses others will typically make decisions that serve their own interests without considering how those decisions affect others. In the context of a romantic relationship, this might mean that a man will make major life choices, such as where to live, what career to pursue, or how to spend his time, without consulting you or considering how his choices might impact your life. Instead of seeing you as a partner to navigate life with, he views the relationship as a vehicle for fulfilling his personal desires, using it to enhance his own life while disregarding the consequences for you. In his world, his goals and ambitions take precedence, and your needs or aspirations are secondary to his own. Moreover, self-serving actions are often coupled with a lack of empathy. A man who is using you may show little to no concern for your struggles, desires, or emotional needs. His responses may come off as dismissive or unsympathetic when you share something personal with him. When you face challenges or express vulnerability, his reaction is typically not one of compassion or understanding, but rather one of impatience or indifference. He may offer you superficial or generic advice, but never truly takes the time to understand what you're going through or offer meaningful support. His lack of empathy makes you feel like you are not truly seen or heard, which can erode the emotional connection in the relationship. This pattern of self-serving behavior also extends to the way he takes credit for shared successes or good times, while deflecting responsibility when things go wrong. In a healthy, balanced relationship, both people share in the highs and lows, celebrating achievements together and supporting one another during difficult times. However, a man who uses you will often act as though he is solely responsible for the successes, relishing in the glory while leaving you feeling overlooked or unappreciated. Conversely, when things go wrong, he may be quick to blame you or external circumstances, deflecting any responsibility for the situation. This tactic allows him to maintain a sense of superiority while keeping you in a position where you feel as though you have to constantly work harder to prove your worth or justify your actions. Ultimately, self-serving behavior creates an imbalance in the relationship. You may find yourself putting in all the effort, making the sacrifices, and offering emotional support, while he continues to focus on his own needs and desires, leaving you feeling drained and unfulfilled. This imbalance not only diminishes the quality of the relationship, but it also erodes your sense of self-worth, as you begin to feel like you are simply a means to an end for him. A man who uses you will not reciprocate the care, effort, or emotional investment you give, and will continue to prioritize himself while leaving you to carry the weight of the relationship. A relationship is built on mutual respect, understanding, and the willingness to share and invest in one another's lives. However, when one person consistently prioritizes their own needs above those of the other, it's clear that something is wrong. A man who is using you will demonstrate self-serving actions, where his decisions, behaviors, and choices revolve solely around his own desires and interests, with little to no consideration for your needs, desires, or feelings. This constant self-centeredness creates a dynamic where your contributions feel insignificant, as if you exist solely to serve his purposes rather than to be an equal partner in the relationship. At first, you may find it easy to overlook or rationalize this behavior. After all, we all have our moments of selfishness. It's not unusual for someone to occasionally put their own needs first, especially during stressful or challenging times. However, when this becomes a regular pattern, it signals that something much deeper is at play. A man who uses you will consistently make choices that reflect his interests while ignoring or dismissing your own. Whether it's making plans without considering your schedule or pursuing his goals without any regard for how it impacts you, his actions will show that his priorities come first, and your needs are secondary. The absence of support also extends beyond emotional and physical availability. It can be the refusal to acknowledge your feelings or needs when you express them. For example, if you share your struggles, he might downplay them or ignore them altogether. Instead of offering empathy or a solution, he may redirect the focus to his own problems, making the situation about him rather than about your needs. This is a common tactic used by individuals who are using others. They center the conversation around their own needs, leaving you to feel that your challenges are insignificant. Sometimes the lack of support can be disguised as indifference or passive avoidance. Instead of directly refusing to help or engage, he might simply act like he doesn't notice your need for support. You might find yourself struggling in silence, wishing for him to step up, but instead he continues with his life as if nothing is wrong. He might make excuses for why he's unable to be there for you, such as work commitments or personal issues, but these excuses are often just a mask for the truth that he's not interested in putting in the effort to support you. When support is crucial, he is nowhere to be found. When a person is genuinely invested in a relationship, they prioritize being there for you during your most challenging times. They recognize that relationships are not just about being present for the good times, but also about showing up when things get tough. If a man is consistently absent when you need him, it's a clear indication that he's not fully invested in the relationship. Instead, he's focused on his own needs and desires without any real concern for your emotional well-being. The lack of consistent support can also erode the trust you have in the relationship. Trust is built on reliability and the expectation that the other person will be there when needed. When this support is withdrawn or never offered, it becomes increasingly difficult to rely on the person, and trust begins to erode. You might start second-guessing their intentions, wondering if they genuinely care, or if they're just there to take from you when it's convenient for them. This lack of trust can lead to feelings of resentment and disappointment as you begin to recognize the one-sided nature of the relationship. In the long term, this dynamic can lead to emotional exhaustion. You give and give, pouring your energy into the relationship, but receive little to nothing in return. The emotional toll of constantly being the one who provides support without receiving any in return can leave you feeling drained and unfulfilled. You might start to feel as though you are constantly seeking validation or reassurance that the relationship is mutual, but it never comes. The absence of support can make you feel invisible, as if your needs don't matter or are unimportant. It's essential to understand that support is not just about grand gestures or dramatic moments. It's also about the small, everyday acts of kindness and care that show someone is invested in your well-being. If you are the one consistently reaching out, planning and maintaining the connection, but he doesn't reciprocate these actions, then you are the only one keeping the relationship afloat. This imbalance can be emotionally draining as you are constantly giving without receiving the same level of effort or care in return. Eventually, you may find yourself at a breaking point where the lack of support becomes too much to bear. It's at this point that you may realize that the person you thought was a partner, a friend, or someone who cared for you is actually someone who only shows up when it's convenient for him. The absence of support is not a temporary issue or an unfortunate situation. It's a pattern that reflects a deeper problem with the dynamic of the relationship. It's a sign that you are being used, that your needs are not a priority, and that the relationship is one-sided. In any meaningful relationship, one of the most essential aspects is the mutual support between individuals. It is the foundation of trust, respect, and emotional connection. However, when you find yourself in a situation where the support you give is never reciprocated, it's a clear sign that something is amiss. A man who is using you will often be present when it benefits him, but absent when you need him most. No, this lack of consistent support can take a significant emotional toll as it creates a sense of imbalance, leaving you feeling isolated and emotionally unsupported. At first, it may not be immediately obvious. Maybe he's there for the small, easy moments, celebrations, casual conversations, or times when there's little emotional risk involved. You might feel appreciated during those times, believing that there is genuine care in the relationship. But when the stakes are higher, when you're going through something difficult or need someone to lean on, his absence becomes undeniable. You might be in the middle of a personal crisis, a loss, or a challenging situation, and yet he's nowhere to be found. He might offer empty words of comfort, but his actions show little to no effort to actually support you. The absence of support manifests in various ways. It can be the lack of emotional availability when you need to talk about something important. Perhaps when you reach out, he's too busy, distracted, or simply unwilling to engage. It can be the lack of physical presence when you need someone by your side. whether it's for a medical emergency, a difficult conversation, or just to offer a comforting presence. When the time comes for him to show up for you, he may be noticeably absent, leaving you to face your challenges alone. Emotional manipulation is one of the most insidious tactics used by individuals who seek to exploit others. It's subtle, often hidden behind a veil of charm, affection, or sympathy, making it difficult to recognize at first. A man who is using you will often employ emotional manipulation to control the dynamics of the relationship, making you feel guilty, responsible, or confused about your feelings. This is not about honest communication or mutual understanding. Instead, it's about bending your emotional state to fit his desires and needs. At the heart of emotional manipulation is the distortion of reality. A man who uses you may twist situations or conversations in a way that makes you question your actions, your feelings, or your perceptions. For example, if you express a concern or frustration, he may respond in a way that makes you feel as though you're overreacting or being unreasonable. Rather than addressing the issue at hand, he redirects the conversation to focus on how your emotions are the real problem, creating a sense of self-doubt. This can leave you feeling guilty for expressing your own feelings and cause you to second-guess your own emotional responses. Another common form of emotional manipulation is guilt tripping. He may use your care, kindness, or vulnerability against you, making you feel as though you owe him something, whether that's time, attention, or emotional support. He might say things like, "I'm surprised you're not willing to help me when I've always been there for you." Or, "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me." These statements are designed to make you feel like a bad person, even when you've done nothing wrong. They leverage your sense of responsibility and empathy to get you to give more than you should, often at the expense of your own needs. In some cases, the emotional manipulation is less overt, but still deeply harmful. A man might use passive-aggressive behavior to undermine you emotionally. He might withhold affection, act cold or distant, or give you the silent treatment when you don't meet his expectations. The silence and withdrawal serve to punish you for not adhering to his needs or desires, creating a sense of anxiety and insecurity within you. Instead of confronting issues directly, he lets you feel the weight of his disapproval in indirect, emotionally painful ways. This constant tension can keep you on edge, unsure of where you stand, and make you overly focused on trying to appease him, all the while neglecting your own emotional well-being. Imagine this for a moment. You're standing at the crossroads of your life, uncertain about your relationships, perhaps overwhelmed by the complexity of human interaction. And there, amidst the noise, is a realization that you've been taken advantage of. You've been used. Now, this isn't a comfortable thought, is it? No. In fact, it's uncomfortable, deeply unsettling. But it's also crucial to confront, because how can you possibly move forward if you don't fully understand what's been happening to you? When we talk about relationships, whether personal or romantic, the concept of reciprocity is vital. Reciprocity is the foundation of any healthy interaction. It is the mutual exchange of effort, care, and respect between two people. Yes. But what happens when one person consistently takes more than they give? When one individual drains the other without contributing in return, it becomes evident that something is off. The first key sign that a man is using you is the lack of reciprocity in the relationship. This goes beyond simple acts of kindness or support. It's about a deep, ongoing pattern where your efforts, your time, your energy, and even your resources are disproportionately invested while the other person remains indifferent or absent. You begin to notice that your needs, your desires, and your well-being are sidelined in favor of their own. They demand attention, time, and care from you, but offer little in return. At first, this might seem harmless. You might think it's just an off day, or they're going through a tough time and need your help more than usual. You give because you care, and you want to be supportive. But over time, the imbalance becomes glaring. You begin to realize that no matter how much you give, it is never enough. Your emotional energy, your time, your resources seem to be perpetually drained without any real effort to reciprocate. Their needs always seem to take priority, while yours go unmet. This lack of reciprocity can manifest in various ways. It could be in the form of one-sided emotional labor. You might find yourself constantly offering emotional support, listening to their problems, and offering solutions. But when you need someone to listen to you, they are nowhere to be found. Perhaps they show up only when it's convenient for them, or they expect you to drop everything to cater to their needs while showing little interest in your own. This imbalance is not a fleeting issue. It is a pattern that begins to reveal the true nature of the relationship. The consequences of this one-sided dynamic are significant. Over time, you might start to feel exhausted, overwhelmed, and even resentful. You give so much, but it never feels like you're receiving anything meaningful in return. You begin to question your worth, wondering if you're only valuable to the other person when you are useful to them. Your sense of self becomes entwined with the role of being the giver, the provider of support, but never the receiver. The emotional toll of this can be devastating. You start to feel empty, as though you're pouring from an empty cup with no one to refill it. It's also important to understand that lack of reciprocity isn't limited to emotional labor alone. It can extend to practical aspects of the relationship as well. Well, maybe you're the one who always initiates plans, makes the effort to keep in touch, or takes care of logistical matters. Meanwhile, the other person remains passive, offering little to no effort in maintaining the relationship. You might find that you are the one always making sacrifices, whether it's rearranging your schedule to accommodate their needs or providing financial support. But when the tables are turned, they are nowhere to be found. The imbalance becomes increasingly apparent, and yet they continue to take without offering anything in return.